Hi, I'm your host Vasco Duarte. Welcome to the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast, where we share tips and tricks from Scrum Masters around the world. Every day, we bring you inspiring answers to important questions that all Scrum Masters face day after day. Welcome, Agilists. We're here for a very special bonus episode with our guests from Down Under, Michael Huynh and Craig Smith. Hey, guys.
G'day, Vasco.
Howdy, Vasco.
Welcome to the show. Before we dive into the topic, and the topic is going to be very interesting, at least for me, rethinking the product owner and Scrum Master roles, and some more than that. We'll dive into that in a minute. Why don't you guys give us a quick intro? Michael, why don't you go first?
Thanks, Vasco. Hey, it's great to be here, man. I've always wanted to be on this show, and finally, here's my chance. This is absolutely amazing. I'm based out of Australia, so based out of Queensland. I'm an Agile coach. I've been in the Agile space for about over a decade now. Really enjoy it. Been in all sorts of different roles. Mostly spent my time in government, so understand what some of the more interesting challenges in the government space, and more recently gone back into private, and I've moved to Queensland. So that's a little bit about me. Over to you, Craig.
So I'm Craig. I've been around the Agile world for over 20 years now. So, I started back when I had one book, which was called Extreme Programming Explained, XP Explained. It was the only book I could actually get my hands on. So anyone who's been around for a long time will remember that. Had to wait 3 years for a trainer to come to Australia so I could finally actually just see if I was even just making things up or even doing it remotely right. Luckily, that was a good experience. And spent a lot of time in my early career in banking and finance, insurance type industries, and for the last 10 or 15 years I've been wandering around the countryside helping organizations in all sorts of different industries and fields all around the world on their journey. Also a trainer, a coach, and my current role is actually a product lead, so see all of the different things.
Absolutely. And of course, this episode is based on a talk by Michael and Craig at the Agile Online Summit 2023. In that talk, they suggested that we need to rethink the roles of the Scrum Master and the product owner. And I would even care to venture maybe others as well. And that talk sparked a thought in my mind. And as I was listening to Craig's and Michael's arguments, I started to think that, it starts to sound like when we adopt Agile in a software organization, it's not just about changing some of the processes, kind of refocusing what does it mean to manage the work. Maybe it's really the start of a foundational change, is what I wrote on Twitter and LinkedIn, in how we see organizations and their structures, right? The structures inside of the organization. So my thought was, what if this is just the start, Agile adoption that is just the start of a leadership revolution? What would that mean for us and our organizations? And that's kind of what sparked the conversation and led us to schedule and ultimately record this episode, this bonus episode. But before we dive into what the future might hold for us, Craig and Michael, give us a short summary of what your main points were on the talk for those that didn't have the chance to listen to it yet.
I think the main thing, and we started our talk, Michael and I, by suggesting that this might be a little controversial for listeners because, let's face it, we have all made our careers and lives, at least in the recent future, for some of us, like I said before, for a long time on this Agile bandwagon. But part of me has always thought, and whenever I train new people or coach new people, is that I always try to remember what got me excited about this in the first place. And what got me excited about agility was the fact that, hey, I was just getting stuff done. But what has happened as the agile industry has revolved around us is that that's become in a lot of organizations, particularly, just to follow the take Agile out of the box and follow the rules and the processes. And particularly when you look at a team level roles like the Scrum Master and Product Owner, and that's where we wanted to, as you say, start the conversation. What we came to the conclusion about is that, look, these are the intent of the roles is important, but have we lost sight in the way that people are actually applying the roles? So it's not about just facilitating a bunch of events every 2 weeks, or making sure a backlog's up to date. There's actually really important things here, and I think you've sort of hit the nail on the head. Is that maybe we've lost sight of that in just trying to dot the I's and cross the T's versus what we're actually intended to go out and do.
Yeah, exactly, Craig, and absolutely, and you covered that off well, because the things that that started off at team level, and the intent of it was always to go bigger and broader, right? To solve the challenges that an organization usually has around some of the hierarchy, some of the decision making, and trying to get value out for the organization, right? So even if you go back to some of the Scrum, if you go back to the Scrum guide, some of the things that talk about it is about generating value. So it comes back to generating value, not just for the team, but for the organization. I think we lost sight of how we are generating value for the organization, and we look at things quite myopically, focused on just teams, just processes. Yeah, we can coach the teams all we want, and we can, focus on the teams, but there's only so much coaching a team can have before you really need to look systemically and look at the systems around it that's supporting the team. Once you resolve all that, your team can actually thrive.
So when I heard this talk, and my take on it was that you guys were not talking about the Scrum Master role and the Product Owner role only and in isolation. And I think Michael's latest comment here kind of emphasizes that. But when we think about Agile adoption, there is a case for us to think, are the Scrum Master role and the Product Owner role adequate for software organizations? Are they still focusing on value, or are we, as Michael just pointed out, maybe getting lost in the follow the process mentality, right? But when I started thinking about the talk you guys gave at the Agile Online Summit, I actually started to realize that a lot of the arguments that you were making are valid for other roles. You could have made similar arguments for the team lead or the lead engineer or the team manager or the department head or the CTO. A lot of these roles are being lost to the let's follow the process. Now, of course, different processes for different roles. Like if I imagine CTOs might be pretty busy. We're recording this in November. CTOs might be pretty busy trying to plan the roadmap for 2024, which is the year ahead, which is, of course, as we know, totally counterproductive to the agile delivery of value, because you can't predict what you need in 2024. And a lot of the planning cycles are all about what are the features and stories we're going to deliver in the first quarter. And perhaps, if you're lucky, a little bit less granular for the further quarters. But in many companies, they are planning the whole 12 months on the feature and story level, right? And when I heard your arguments about the Scrum Master and the Product Owner role, which were, I think, two-sided. Like, one was, have we lost sight of what Agile is all about? And the second was, are we getting lost in the follow the process mentality? That's how I understood it. And when I think about the roles like team lead and department head and CTO, I see the same patterns. And unlike yourselves, which you focus on the Product Owner and Scrum Master role, my question is it actually the problem that not that Scrum Masters and Product Owners are getting stuck in the process, but rather that the way CTOs, department heads, and team leads want them to work is to get stuck in the process? And of course, then they are also to blame because they follow that, right? They get stuck in this. So that's what got me thinking about, hey, but have we even understood what Agile means for software development at all? Right? Because, Craig, you said when I started adopting Agile, I just got things done. right? And that was the core of Agile. It was, like it says the manifesto, we're trying it out, we're learning how to develop software in a better way. And I don't think that the CTOs of this world, even the CEOs, of course, and the team leads, the team managers, and the product managers or chief product managers or lead product managers are following this. I don't think they have understood either, in general, what Agile is there to do. What do you guys think?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head, and there's a reason why we chose the title that we did, because you're spot on. Is that if you think about it, apart from a couple of other examples, when you read any Agile, book or framework, what are the only two roles that they talk about? Well, three roles. They talk about the Scrum Master or the equivalent name, the product owner or equivalent name, and they talk about the team. Now, if we add into the mix Agile Coach and maybe Enterprise Agile Coach, if we kind of put in the derivatives onto it, they're the only Agile roles. Everybody else is essentially still doing the role that they had. So what's driving that change?
And don't forget project manager, by the way.
Well, but that's not it. That was an existing role. So all of those roles existed, right? The new ones, right? So how do we look like we're Agile? We hire a bunch of Scrum Masters and product owners, and now we must be Agile. Now, I'm not suggesting that organizations or even any listeners here are, falling necessarily into that trap. But what starts to happen, and one of the drivers for this was, looking at organizations, in the last 12 months that have now started to cut, Agile roles from the organization, because the question starts to become, where's the value? And the problem is that it's additional overhead, right? It's like, hang on a second, I had a team with a bunch of engineers and tech leads and things like that, but now I'm carrying around an extra, two roles in seemingly every team. Where is the value return for that? And any person who understands agility knows that if you've got somebody who's actually making sure that we're removing the impediments and getting on track and all those kind of things, the value can be there. But when we follow this whole let's follow the process and let's make sure we do the events and maybe I'll be a Scrum Master for 4 teams, or all of those things start to come into play, then we lose the original intent. And for me, particularly if you look at the Scrum Master role, my argument is that it was never supposed to be a long-term role in its own right? It just says that it's one person on the team. If that makes sense for that person to be a dedicated person, so be it. But you just need somebody essentially keeping sure that things are on track. You then have to make the best decision on how to do it. And the same, by the way, goes to the product owner. The whole idea of having a product owner on the team was so we can make quick decisions, so we can get quick feedback. If I can do that because I sit right next to the business people, the subject matter experts, and they are the best people to be the product owner, and they can be available when we're making decisions, then that's the absolute best way of doing it, not having another person in the middle who has to go and get authority anyway. So no wonder organizations are starting to ask the question. You hit the nail on the head. We haven't thought about what is the change for a lot of those other roles in order to get true, let's call it business agility.
And I think you're spot on there, Craig. And I think the other thing that we need to have a look at is duplication of roles, right? So there's a lot of duplicate roles, and you've got these roles that are supposed to be the key decision makers, the one that is driving the vision, like a product owner. But often this responsibility does not actually lie with these sorts of roles. It actually lies a lot further up in the chain, like with the executives and stuff like that. So the question is, what is the product owner doing to add value, right? I mean, they're not coming up with the vision. They're not. They might be helping out the roadmap, but generally those things are pretty clear on what the strategy is from the top and where the organization wants to go, right? So it's finding how do these roles actually add value and actually understand what value means to the organization, right? So if you're in these roles, how else are you going to add the value? So you also need to understand, at the end of the day, it comes down to money, right? Money is the most important thing to most companies. And most of the things that you can trace back in terms of value it's traced back to money, whether it's cultural or happiness of a team. It has some sort of financial impact as well. So if you're in those roles like a Scrum Master type role where you helping to build effective teams and cultures and things like that, then there is that tie-in about value.
So I really like the thought of, okay, so product owner and Scrum Master are there to generate value. How are they generating value? I think that's a very important question for us to ask ourselves, all of us who are in those roles, an Agile coach or enterprise Agile coach, as Greg said. But I think we need to ask the same from the other roles. Like if we, let's imagine we are part of the software development and product development community, so not the Agile community here for a minute. If we are part of that community, we also have to keep ourselves accountable and ask, hey, how exactly is my CFO adding value to my company? And if I just take that further, CFOs, for example, will use terms like CapEx for software projects, that's capital expenditure, or called investment, which is a totally wrong metaphor for what software is, because software is always a cost. Buying a software project is not the same as buying a mining machine or a loom or whatever. It's not stuff that you can sell later. In fact, most software is custom developed, so you can't sell any of it later, right? So CapEx as the metaphor for software development in terms of investment or expense is totally wrong, but CFOs are doing that all over the place. The CapEx mentality, or the capital expenditure or capitalization mentality, leads us to having project management frameworks applied to software. Even where SAFe is, there are still projects. Even where XP is, there are still projects, and projects are totally inadequate for managing software development. That's another example. We employ project managers, typically very well-paid project managers, to run software projects when in fact they have no clue what software is. When you try to apply project into a software delivery process, it doesn't work, and it doesn't work in many different ways, from the managing the team level work to all the way to planning and even following the delivery over time. That's why I wrote the book No Estimates, for example. Estimation is another example. Managers, whether it is portfolio managers or PMO managers, are applying the estimation mentality into managing software projects. That is literally destroying value as we speak. There's many different ways in which they destroy value. And if we go back to the original and very simple and yet very focused statement that Craig said a minute ago, getting things done, a lot of our leaders, whether it is team lead or CTO or department heads, are actually bringing in processes, whether it is from HR or portfolio planning or whatever. They are bringing in processes to the teams that actually actively prevent teams from getting things done. Right? So I want to take that question that you guys asked further and say, I think we need a totally different leadership structure for software development. And I would say that we could totally remove many of the layers who are there. And, layers means that they go up somewhere, and that means higher paid, more expensive roles. We could remove most of the layers for any small software delivery process, let's say 3 to 10 teams, right? We could just work with a Scrum Master and a product owner for 1 or 2 teams, and you would have 2 or 3 of each of those roles, and that's it. We don't need team leads, we don't need department heads, we don't even need a CTO if we have an experienced product owner in that particular environment. When you go bigger, you need to add more people, but perhaps not as many as you think. Let's look at less, for example, right? The scaling framework that argues for having only one product, which in most organizations is a valid statement, and therefore also a lot less people involved. And so I'm asking myself, the question you're asking is valid, and it's coming from agilists like you guys, but I'm asking myself, like, as a software development community member, right? Not Agile specific. I need to ask the same thing, because I see a lot of waste and a lot of useless roles in software organizations today.
Yeah, and I think we got this term called business agility, which I think is a badly named term to be honest with you. But that's really our challenge is, whether you're a software organization or whether, you're a government or any of those type of things, the idea is essentially how can we be most efficient, yet but also with quality and innovation, get the product from one end of the process to the other. Right. And the reality is that, unless you are a 20-person startup, there's going to be many hands and things that those things have to go through. How can we streamline those processes and put the decision making in the hands of the people who understand that best? So you're right, the leadership problem. And what worries me is that a lot of the organizations I work with, and Michael and I have given this a name, we call it the Bill problem, just because, we're going to call them the leader Bill. But we come across, particularly, leaders of different departments, whether it be software engineering or even, other areas of the business that actually don't understand what their people are doing. We often talk about the engineer that's rose up to be the leader, and perhaps lacking some leadership skills. We can train that, right? We can we can help people on that journey. What worries me more is the leader that gets so detached, either because they never had any knowledge in the first place, or because it kind of gets almost sucked out of them. Because and I call this the professional meeting goer, right? That they spend 36 hours a week, right? Their Outlook calendar looks like a coloring book, and they believe that their role is to go to as many meetings as they get invited to in order to push things along. When actually, walking the floor, or virtually walking the floor these days, to actually see what their people are up to and how they can help is the most important thing. So, particularly in some of those middle layers, but the accountability goes all the way up, is we've kind of lost what leadership really really truly means. And I don't know about you, Michael, but in organizations that I've worked with probably for the last 4 or 5 years, I could count on one hand the amount of true brilliant leaders that I've come across. So I've come across some very awesome people, but when it comes to actually leading people, and spending time just to come and say hello, or what are you up to, or taking an interest in what they're doing, I know that's becoming less and less, and it's concerning to me.
Absolutely, Craig. And I remember in the previous organization that I was in, I even suggested the leader to come down and talk to their people, because no one actually knew who the leader was. They said they always just see them in this sort of glass fishbowl and never had the conversation with them. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to drag you up here and I'm going to introduce you to our leaders. And the feedback I gave was like, you really need to go see your people, actually understand what they're doing, build some empathy, understand some of their challenges and some of their work, so you can actually do something about it. There's a lot of these conversations that we're having on the floor and on the ground that we're trying to push things up. But what you find is that when you go through different levels of the hierarchy or further up, that some of this information gets lost, or lost in translation, or it doesn't get... there's not enough emphasis put on some of the challenges that they've got at the team level. And I've worked with some brilliant leaders who actually cared, actually was sitting next to the developers, actually understanding what's actually going on. And most recently, I've joined this organization, and I've got a wonderful CIO who's absolutely fantastic, wants to know about everything and truly cares. And I think truly caring and having the accountability to care, that authenticity really shows, and it motivates people, and they care, right? When you care, they care.
So we're getting to the point. There's about 10 minutes for us before we close off here. So I think we need to offer our listeners some ideas for the future. So I'm going to ask you the key question, based on your experience, what you know from Agile and what you know from organizations that you've worked with. What should leadership in software organizations look like in the future? And of course, we can talk about behaviors, we can talk about structures, we can talk about processes, or all three of them. So Michael, why don't we start with you? What should leadership in software organizations look like in the future?
In the future, I think it comes down to behaviors. Behaviors is the most important thing. Now, behaviors is so culture is the product of our behaviors, right? It's how we act. It's what we align to in value and principles. Now, they will drive the culture of an organization. Now, there's some organizations that are naturally startup-y, right? And they don't have much structure, but their culture is to go fast. Their structure is to not have the hierarchy and fast information, right? And experiment. So each culture is different, and the leaders need to have those sorts of behaviors that drive the right sort of culture. And then the structures and stuff is actually important, but is it more important than the behaviors?
So if you take the behaviors thing, I'll take the structure argument to a certain extent. Then we talk a lot about product-based teams, but here's the interesting thing, Vasco. I mean, you were talking about let us consider as members of the software engineering community. We've kind of already siloed ourselves, a little bit whenever we think about that. But it's not just that; it's the HR community, the finance community, the legal community, the procurement community. They're the things that we allocate ourselves to, and that's fine. That's where we learn. That's where we grow. That's where we come up with new things. But at the end of the day, our organizations are not about software or about legal or about HR or about finance. They're about whatever the product or the service is that we offer. And so we structure ourselves, things like I'm in software, I have to report to the CTO, and the answer is, well, why? Do we need a CTO or a CIO or a CDO and all those types of roles? Absolutely. We need somebody who is making sure things are in the right direction, but do they need this massive hierarchy underneath them? And I think that's we see this in large organizations a lot. Is that structure is what inhibits the end-to-end process to work. So we're structured around the IT, and we go, we'll keep all the IT people together. But actually, the problem with that is that's the old water scrum fall. It's only the middle of the process. And so, part of our job as technologists is to understand the problem. And so we have to be at the seat of the table at the beginning. We also have to be, aware of what's happening at the end to know, are people using this? Are people, is it working? End user feeling, so we can actually ultimately then make a better product. Whereas, come back to your earlier comment, right? If you're running everything like a project, it's like, no, we wait for the next project to come along for someone to tell us what needs to be done. Product centered teams ultimately drive innovation. So the question is, how can we break down those traditional silos and restructure ourselves in a way, but that gets in the way of people and then their empires and fiefdoms and all of those other things. And that's the challenge that most organizations have. As Michael said, you're in the small, startup type company, you're just focused on getting things done because, you got to make sure that the money hits. But once you start to get bigger and you put more of those structures in place, that's where it starts to fall apart. So I'm not sure we've unlocked what the right answer to that is. None of the Agile frameworks, I think, have it exactly right. We talk about this product model, but people struggle with it because organizations come on and go, oh, my product is that we have a CMS over here and that's our product. It's like, nah, that's a platform. Like, let's try again, right? What is our product? The thing that we're actually selling, the thing that actually makes us money, our emphasis towards value. Just because you have a CMS, it's like, well, good luck to you. Everyone's got a CMS. So the idea, even the definitions of products and what we call those in our organizations does get in the way.
Yeah. So we've covered culture and behaviors. That was Michael's part. We cover structure. That was Craig's part. And of course, because I am a recovering project manager, I need to cover process. And all of the things that you guys said are important. So I'm not diminishing from those at all. I'm adding to that there are certain processes that are adequate for software businesses, and then there are some processes that are completely inadequate. And I'm a project manager. Project management is one of those that is completely inadequate. Starting projects once a year or twice a year or even 4 times a year if you do quarterly is a waste of time, because software doesn't exist in starts and stops, right? Software either exists or it doesn't. and the services and the businesses we serve, whether it's individuals or entire businesses we serve, then they need to kind of retrofit their processes to us, because hey, we only deliver one version a year, so you have to take it one version a year. I remember working at a very large telco company, and I talked about continuous release, and often the pushback that I got was, well, but our customers, they only take the software in once a year, and they have to stop their services in order to take the new software version in. So of course we can't release more times a year. And I asked, so do you have only one customer? Like, how can you predict what your customers are going to do with what you deliver? You can't, right? And when we do projects, as an example of what I mean by processes, project mindset is a series of processes that need to be instituted, right? You have to have a project planning before you can have project budgeting, before you can have project approval, right? There's a series of steps that we need to follow, and those are completely inadequate for software. And I would add to that, coming back to what Craig, you said, I do think we are siloing ourselves a little bit here in the discussion. But on the other hand, what I usually say when I talk to my clients is that, every business is a software business. You just don't know it yet. And I can talk about, television. They thought they were a broadcasting business, and then Netflix and Amazon and other streaming services came in, and they realized that actually one of our core competencies is video streaming on the internet. Go figure, right? That's what Netflix changed in that business, as an example. And of course, we have Amazon for shipping and delivering products all over the world, which is basically done with software. Of course, there's a lot of other things around, but software needs to be there. So when I think about software here, I'm actually thinking about everything that software enables as well. And I think that we, as the Agile community, now going even deeper into that silo, Craig, is we need to offer solutions. And a very simple solution to the process question is software is a continuous delivery process. We are always delivering, even if it is only to a test system, or even if it is only to a subset of customers, we are continuously delivering. And project management, as an example, is totally inadequate for a continuous delivery process. So one of the things I would do would be to get rid of project management, as an example.
And I think, just to hit on that, right, let's go back to 1995, right, Extreme Programming Scrum. Both of them is, we deliver things in 2 week increments, right? We started with a month, we got rid of that. That was 1995. Now, what happens somewhere in this whole scaling debacle is now it all of a sudden became, we do quarterly planning and we deliver things that, maybe in quarters, but of course, because projects are like, well, actually that's a big thing, so the first quarter, as you said, will be the planning, and then the second quarter will be the operations, and then the third planning, we might write a little bit of software then, and then we might deliver something. We missed the point. So we've known for, almost 30 years now that we have to get faster at delivering that. And that's before 1995 was before we even knew about the internet and, mobile and blockchain and AI and insert every other, new technology that's come along. The reality is that, the manifesto says, months to weeks, right? To 2023, it probably should say from days to seconds. Just cut the middle thing out, right? It's deliver in the shortest possible time frame. Principle number 4. So we knew that was the problem. We've somehow missed lost the plot somewhere along the way.
And I would add to that, Craig, that we need different leadership culture and structures in order to put these processes in place. And I think the talk you guys started with, let's rethink the PO or product owner and Scrum Master role. I would say that for us working with software delivery, we need to rethink the whole set of roles, not just those two. And also, of course, also the culture and the processes, as we talked about. Michael, your thoughts?
It's a major challenge, Vasco. I don't know how we're going to solve it. I think we also have something to do to contribute to it. And with the certification industrial complex. That hasn't, I mean, it did help with the success of Agile, but it probably didn't help with the different levels of competencies where you've got, 2-day experts that do some sort of certification, come out and expect to change the world, and they don't know how to do that. Not only that, but look, if you go back to the Scrum guide, it says true leaders. Scrum Masters are true leaders, right? So what does that mean? True leader, right, is stepping into those hard conversations, working with the organization, working with leaders, understanding the value, understanding the issues, and resolving those things so you have effective teams, right? And the same thing goes with your product owners. Those sorts of roles are there, and they need to be accountable, be truly accountable for the value that they need to do to add to the organization. That's the number one thing they need to do in those roles. Like any sort of role that you're in, that you join an organization, the most important thing you need to do is add value, right?
And now to bring that back to Vasco's point, is that needs to come from leadership who actually give those roles the accountability in order to do that, right? So you can say it, but are we truly giving those teams, right, the ability to say, you know what, you look after this thing, you live and die by by how this thing turns up. And if you've got a culture that sure, right, we fail, if we're going to fail, we fail fast, but we're so scared of all those things, we put on so much governance and steps and process. To come to your point around project management, is that we kind of miss the point, right? We spend more money trying to think about what might happen, as opposed to actually thinking about what can we actually do and be truly innovative. And the organizations that unlock that are the ones that become successful.
Absolutely. Well, we're getting close to the end. Before we go, if you want to hear Michael's and Craig's talk, you can get your Scrum Master community membership at agileonlinesummit.com. I'll put the link in the show notes for those of you who might be interested. But I think that this conversation already opened a lot more avenues for thinking, and also for us to kind of reflect on what our role should be in this conversation, which has started. Like, it's inevitable. The old structures don't work for software. We still don't know what the new structures will look like, but we have a stepping stone, that's Agile, and of course we can start there. Gentlemen, before we go, do tell us, where can people find out more about you and the work that you're doing? Let's start with you, Craig.
Yes, if they want to know more, they can find me on places like LinkedIn. My website's at craigsmith.id.au. Have a podcast, The Agile Revolution, but it's been a little dormant of late. So go listen to Vasco's podcast instead until I put more episodes up. And work-wise, if you want to get hold of me for any sort of Agile stuff, you can find me at softed.com.
Michael?
Fantastic. And you can find me on LinkedIn. So I'm not as prominent as Craig everywhere, but you can get in touch with me on LinkedIn.
Absolutely. And why not, everybody? Just go there and ask a few follow-up questions. I'm sure there's a lot of questions that came out of this conversation. And that was the goal, to start asking the right questions, as we need to evolve the way we develop software and organize our companies and organizations. Thank you very much, Craig. Thank you very much, Michael. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for your generosity with your time and your knowledge.
Thank you, Vasco. It's been fun.
It's been a pleasure, Vasco.
We really hope you liked our show. And if you did, why not rate this podcast on Stitcher or iTunes? Share this podcast and let other Scrum Masters know about this valuable resource for their work. Remember that sharing is caring.